Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the best place for the best takes. I'm Benjamin Cure. This is the Benjamin Cure Show on a Monday where, truthfully, I don't know what to think. We are inching closer and closer and closer to the big game, the Super Bowl in Las Vegas. And it feels like we may see some teams there that we did not expect to see there just a few weeks and a few months ago. But that's the game of football for you. There were 8 football teams this weekend competing for a spot in the NFC and in the AFC Championship. 4 games. I went 3-1 with my picks. The one loss was, of course, one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time already, in my opinion. One of the greatest quarterbacks, certainly, of this generation. Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs beating the Buffalo Bills 27-24. A narrow margin after a comeback after the half. This is why football truly is the greatest sport on earth. And I compare it to combat sports because you can have all the statistics and all of the attributes stacked against you. The other team, the other opponent can have all of these things in their favor. And in the end, it really doesn't matter. Football is played on a football field. It's not played on an Excel spreadsheet. It's not played via a box score. Football is played on the football field. And I made the mistake this weekend of thinking that it was played in an Excel spreadsheet. And in the end, I will say, in all fairness to myself, the Kansas City Chiefs played the best game of their lives all year long. I mean, that was, at least, if you disagree with that, Kansas City played their best game of offensive football that they have all year long. This was the best they have looked. Very minimal penalties, very minimal mistakes. Obviously, the big one with Mecole Hardman, the touchback in the end zone, that was a huge mistake. Could have been very costly. In the end, I'm glad the officials made the right call because if not, you would have heard all day, oh, the refs. No, that was a clean game. The referees did not decide that game. Both football teams played excellent, but in the end, Kansas City played the best game they have all year offensively, and it showed in the tape. They were so, and I've noticed this, and I'm glad other people noticed it as well on Twitter, because I was like, I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but when you watch Kansas City in the postseason, and especially now, Mahomes always seems to value possessions, and not necessarily time of possession, but he seems to value possession and holding the football more than any other team and more than any other quarterback in the league. In the postseason, Mahomes values having the ball so much more than everyone else. And it's not a knock on other people. It just shows that Mahomes really understands it is a possession game. A lot of these games against great quarterbacks in the postseason and great teams and great defenses are going to come down to the very end of the game, who has the ball last. And Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs were so hyper efficient, only 41 plays and 27 points. That's incredible. They were so efficient with the football. They were really clean. Travis Kelce, after all that talk, and I said it, I thought he had plateaued this year, and then he was starting to go on a decline. He played really well in that game, showed his true colors. I'm going to talk about him in my next story because I think there is something else going on there. And yes, it does have to do with his personal life and with life beyond football. But credit to the Kansas City Chiefs. And I'm really not going to, today's show, and I'm cutting in the middle of what I'm saying here, but I am really not going to criticize teams too much today. I mean, if you made it to this point, you are one of the better teams in the league. You have done it right for most of the year. There were no frauds left in this. The frauds, we got rid of them last week. The Cowboys, the Miami Dolphins, that was ridiculous. People overvalued those teams. We got too involved in the hype and whatnot. These teams really did and do deserve to be in the position that they are in. And some really great football teams this weekend, unfortunately, took a loss, and we'll talk about those a little bit later. But circling back to this Chiefs game, Chiefs were so efficient. Patrick Mahomes, in spite of everything, in spite of all the talk, hasn't ever been on the road for a road playoff game. Super Bowls apparently don't count as a road playoff game, I guess. But he was just so good, so hyper efficient. Didn't have a 300-yard game, didn't have a 5-touchdown game. He was just Patrick Mahomes. When he needed to have those great moments, he had those great moments. Great moments in the most high-pressure situations make the quarterback, they make the man. And it's why Mahomes is going to be in the conversation for the next 10 years as, you know what, is he the 1B to Brady's 1A? I mean, truthfully, what a performance of a lifetime. And in the end, like I said, box scores, Excel spreadsheets, stats, time of possession, none of this decides games. I can show you all of these different things and point to all these different categories that I like to look at before a game starts. And in the end, really doesn't matter. You saw that this weekend. The Buffalo Bills against the Kansas City Chiefs. The Buffalo Bills had more first downs. They converted more on third down, and they were more efficient on third down. They converted more fourth downs. They were more efficient on fourth down. They dominated time of possession over 37 minutes, and in the end, it wasn't enough. Patrick Mahomes and that Kansas City Chiefs team were so hyper efficient. 27 points off just 41 plays. I mean, they really did make sure to understand going into that game, every possession is going to matter. Weather didn't matter. Being on the road didn't matter. In the end, the better team won. Very happy for the Kansas City Chiefs. In the end, a lot of people out there criticizing Buffalo and criticizing Josh Allen this morning. I saw that on morning TV on, our favorite sports channels and whatnot. I am the first one that is going to criticize players and teams if I feel like there is room to do so. And I think you guys trust me, especially if you watch this show. I don't do it in a shtick way. I criticize teams and players that I think genuinely, man, you came up short. What are you doing? You could this boneheaded decision, this problem, this penalty, this stupid play. So many different moments that I can point to. I look at the Buffalo Bills, and yes, that fake punt return, certain little things, right, that throughout that game you could point to and you could rip into Buffalo for doing and for making the decision to do in that game. A lot of people are doing it this morning, and I'm sure they'll do it this afternoon. I am not going to be one of those people. If I'm the Buffalo Bills and their fans, I genuinely feel hopeless. And I don't mean that I don't mean that in a mean way or in a spiteful way to Buffalo Bills fans. You're not going to play a perfect football game. Yes, the fake punt. Yes, there were so many moments in that game where they could have been better, right, that you'll point to now, and Sean McDermott and whatnot, and people are going to criticize Josh Allen. But in the end, you're not going to play a perfect football game. I would be the first one to criticize Josh Allen or the Buffalo Bills if I felt like the situation merited it. It doesn't. I genuinely feel like you are not going to ever play a perfect football game. It doesn't exist. You're going to have a penalty. You're going to have a moment where you thought you could have been better. You're not going to be 10 for 10 on third down conversions. You're not going to have 40 first downs in a game. You're not going to play perfect football, right? The Buffalo Bills had so few mistakes in that game that to me, you watch them, you watch Von Miller, you watch Josh Allen, you watch Stephon Diggs, you watch Sean McDermott and his play calling, and you can't help but just think, is Buffalo ever going to reach the mountaintop? Because Buffalo at this point, this is probably the healthiest, I take that back, not the healthiest they're ever going to be, but they've had years where they've been healthy. This is the most talented you're ever going to be. Josh Allen's only got 2-3 years of playing this kind of football before he has to really transition to becoming a pocket passer, right? Big Ben didn't last forever. Cam Newton didn't last forever. Hyper-athletic players don't last forever. Russell Westbrook in the NBA, one of the best guys to watch in his prime because he was just so fun to watch. That playing style dissolves and disappears very quickly, and it erodes. Josh Allen only has 2, maybe 3 years left of this kind of football. And I don't want to say the window is closing, but the window is closing. Von Miller, that contract looked great in year one. It made sense. Von Miller doesn't look like the same player after injuries, ACL, missing time, off the field stuff. Didn't feel like his head was in the game. Didn't feel like he felt his best. Let's put it that way. When you watch that game and, they showed him a couple times, and I just thought to myself when I would rewind plays, it's not nearly the same pop. It's not nearly the same aggressiveness off the line, that same boom, that same pressure. Buffalo could not pressure Mahomes or other quarterbacks like they've wanted to this year. And in the end, I don't know if they ended up getting a sack. I know there was a long time where they didn't get a sack, and maybe Buffalo finished with 0 sacks, and it just goes to prove my point. That Buffalo Bills team is reaching the end of their window. Same thing as San Francisco. You've got a lot of big contracts. You've got guys who are in the prime, but they're getting older, and it becomes really obvious that, you know what? These are not the same players that they were 2-3 years ago. And I'm not saying that Josh Allen looked worse. Josh Allen played a relatively good game. In the end, he is not better than Patrick Mahomes, and that's really what this comes down to, even though people say, don't have such a 30,000-foot view. I get that a lot. Sometimes oversimplification is the best way to go. In the end, Mahomes was better than Josh Allen. He was a better facilitator. He was better in big moments. I know that Josh Allen didn't necessarily turn the ball over or have one of those Brett Favre games that we criticized him for. But you know what? He wasn't better than Mahomes, and it showed. And the Buffalo Bills, if I was a Buffalo Bills fan, if I'm the Buffalo Bills roster, if I'm one of those guys on that team, if I'm on staff, if I'm in the front office, when will we ever get over the hump? This was the year to beat the Kansas City Chiefs. You were playing in your home stadium. You were forcing Kansas City to travel. They were not at home. They were not at Arrowhead. You were forcing them to come to your territory when they had their most vulnerable offense yet, when they had a year where they really just looked off, when they had so many drop passes, they weren't playing clean football. Jawan Taylor, the guy that they signed to right tackle, in the end, has been awful this year, one of the most penalized players in all of football history. The stats are just insane, insanely frustrating if you're a Chiefs fan. Wasn't enough. In the end, you may have had the better team. You may have had all the stats on your side. Buffalo, in the end, ended up winning the box score. More first downs, more third down conversions, more efficient on third down, more fourth down conversions, more efficient on fourth down, more total yards, more time of possession, 37 minutes of possession time. They dominated time of possession. All these categories that we look at and we say, that's important, that's an indicator of success. It didn't matter because in the end, greatness will prevail, and Patrick Mahomes truly is one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. He is an all-time great duo when it comes to him and Travis Kelce, who now has surpassed Tom Brady and Rob Gronkowski for most touchdowns all time between a duo in the postseason. Just really incredible stuff. And I know that people were criticizing that stat because, of course, Gronk was injured during a lot of those playoff runs. That's why those numbers aren't higher. In the end, I think it's safe to assume that whatever you feel about the duo, Mahomes and Kelce are one of the greatest duos of all time. Andy Reid, truly one of the best coaches in the game right now. Not sure if he's one of the greatest coaches of all time, but he will certainly solidify it this year if he ends up winning a Super Bowl after this year. Man, I don't know what to say. I picked Buffalo to win this game, and the Kansas City Chiefs came out and they played their best game of the year offensively, and that defense has continued to be the silent and really unsung hero of this team. Credit to both teams. So incredibly proud of both. I know that may sound condescending to some people, but really don't have too many criticisms for the Buffalo Bills. In the end, I would feel pretty hopeless. I don't know if they'll ever get over that hump, and you never say never, but this was the opportunity for them to win, and they can't close. Kansas City Chiefs are headed to the AFC Championship. So yesterday, the sideshow of the Buffalo Bills-Kansas City Chiefs game was Jason Kelce. He apparently, for the first time publicly at least, got to meet Taylor Swift. So did his wife, Kylie Kelce. They were in the suite together having a fun time. A lot of viral moments came out of that. Of course, Jason Kelce taking off his shirt, shotgunning some beers, and jumping down into the stands from the suite. And then he looked like a Viking jumping back in there. I mean, he was just having the time of his life. And of course, Jason Kelce has not made the official announcement that he's retired, but he didn't exactly deny the reporting either when he was on his podcast, New Heights, and he said, I haven't made my announcement yet. He didn't necessarily say, I haven't made my decision yet, nor did he deny the things that he said in the locker room to the guys. Of course, very highly emotional moment after losing that game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. If he did tell his teammates, something like, I plan on retiring or I'm done, it would be understandably so, but kind of obvious. He wears his heart on his sleeve. He didn't deny the reporting after the fact. He just denied, I would like to wait until an announcement is made. And that was kind of his sticking point. And that leads me to believe that he is going to retire, which does sort of spell doom and the beginning of the end of this juggernaut offensive line for the Eagles and what it means for Jalen Hurts. I talked about it on my podcast with Brianna Henschel for the win. I think that this is spelling doom for Jalen Hurts. Losing a great piece of your offensive line, you're going to start to lose members of that offensive line. Due to injuries and due to age and due to retirements and due to maybe free agency. You're not going to be able to keep all those guys and that unit that made them so special and the tush push. You can't do that without Jason Kelce. And so his retirement means a lot for that team. But when I watch Jason Kelce take off his shirt, jump into the crowd, jump back into the suite, have the time of his life, clearly enjoying the moment, feels like he's retired. I don't think anybody's denying that. I think maybe his close family and friends might deny it until the announcement is made. Feels like he knows what he's doing, giving a signed jersey to his favorite fast food employee, his favorite drive-thru employee, who's, I guess, has always helped him out in the mornings and whatnot. Feels like he's done. I tied this conversation last week with a friend of mine, and I just thought to myself, man, I know that Travis Kelce came out about 2 weeks ago now and said, I'm not retiring, and he kind of put to bed the rumors. If Travis Kelce finishes here on a bang, and now he's going to the AFC Championship, even if they lose that game, and even if they make it to the Super Bowl and they lose that game, I don't think it's a Super Bowl or bust for Travis Kelce in the sense that he has to go to the Super Bowl, he has to win it in order to retire. I don't think some great people over the years have said this, Colin Cowherd being one of them, who's consistently said, once you say retirement out loud and you admit that you've thought about it, it never goes away. You are always reopening that window in your head whenever things get tough, whenever you have a moment to yourself, at night before you go to sleep, when you're in the shower. Athletes who think about retirement and who openly say they've thought about it, chances are they are very close to the end, more so than people think. I couldn't shake the feeling that, you know what, whether you like it or not, whether it's football related or not, Travis Kelce is dating Taylor Swift. And there is a huge financial discrepancy between the two, and the way that there was between Tom Brady and Gisele Bündchen, another all-time great power couple in the NFL. That's why I mention it at the time, because now they're divorced. And the pay discrepancy between Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce is even more dramatic. And I don't say that to knock him or anything like that. The reason I bring it up is because Travis Kelce right now is in a stage of his life where he already has 2 Super Bowls. Maybe he wins a third this year. His brother is retiring. Him and his brother have never been closer. I think it would feel weird for Travis Kelce. I think he himself would feel weird playing another year or another 2 years, knowing that his brother is no longer in the league. I think Travis Kelce is now looking at his brother, looking at his brother's family, the wife, the kids, the home, enjoying it, sees his brother getting older, knows they've both taken a ton of punishment because that is the game of football. Jason Kelce more so than Travis Kelce, especially when it comes to the hands. Obviously, offensive linemen, God bless their soul and their hands. That is not an easy pain to live with. But I think Travis looks at his brother and thinks, man, he's on his way out. He's made his money. He's made his legacy. I've sort of done the same for myself. Arguably the greatest center of all time, Jason Kelce. Arguably the greatest tight end of all time, Travis Kelce. Although I went viral last year because I made a take on this show, I do not believe that he's the greatest tight end of all time. I believe that still belongs to Rob Gronkowski. Even though there is debate, arguably one of the best of all time, Travis Kelce may very well say, you know what? I'm done after this year. Whether it's a win in the AFC Championship game or a loss, or you make it to the big game and then you lose it, or best case scenario, you win it. I really do feel like people are, I know that we should take athletes' word at face value and we should take it for what it is, and it's coming directly from the source, so we should trust it more. But man, I kind of watch Travis Kelce, I watch his family, I watch his brother. It feels like they've all got the same idea in their mind. Let's go out with a bang. Who cares? Let's live our lives. Let's have a lot of fun with this. Money is not an object for Travis Kelce anymore. Apparently, there's a lot of engagement rumors swirling around. They're going to be a couple. They're going to be a thing. Reports that Travis Kelce enjoys traveling with Taylor Swift and sort of being her cheerleader, which credit to them. You know, that seems like a really healthy relationship, a lot of fun, and he's having a good time with it. And, you know, there's always ups and downs in relationships, but behind publicly, you know, we can't see behind closed doors. Looks like it's a healthy relationship. Look like they're having fun. I think Travis Kelce is ready to get to that next chapter of his life. And I do think that there is a world in which Travis Kelce says, you know what? My brother's calling it a career. He's retiring. I'm going to do the same. Win, loss, or draw. Winning the AFC Championship, losing it, going to the big game and losing or winning it, best case scenario. I think there is room for doubt as to whether or not Travis Kelce is just going to come back. Even if he said he's not retiring, I don't know. He talked about it earlier this year. Those conversations never leave you. If you're considering retiring and you say it out loud publicly, you are probably closer to the end than definitely closer to the end than to the beginning of your career, and you're definitely closer to it than people think. I think there is room here for Travis Kelce to retire. A report literally dropped before the game saying legendary Chiefs tight end Travis Kelce will retire this offseason. Michelle Tafoya expects after speaking with sources. She says she has different priorities. She says he has different priorities at this stage of his life. His brother Jason is reportedly planning to hang it up, and there are talks of them wanting to retire together. I believe it. I think that there is a much more prevalent possibility of Travis Kelce retiring than we have been told. I apologize. I feel like I cannot get my foot out of my mouth this Monday morning, so I understand it's probably annoying as an audience. I apologize in advance. Let's try to get through this, Ben. Let's try to be better, okay? Let's try to stay focused here. So, next thing I want to talk about is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, specifically Baker Mayfield. And I know 2 interceptions, not a good look. A lot of people saying classic Baker Mayfield. I told you, I'm going to be good cop, Ben, today. I'm going to be really nice to everybody because I feel like if you made it to this point in the season and this point in the NFL year, you are a better you are one of the better teams in the NFL. You are top 4, top 5, in this case, top 8 after this weekend. But I don't really see the point in criticizing these teams too heavily. They made it here for a reason. Now, I can be critical of the results and certain things, but in the end, I think if you look beyond the box score and you look at the tape, that first interception wasn't Baker Mayfield's fault. The second one, yeah, that's going to be a throw that haunts him for a long time. There was some boneheaded throws this weekend across the league. It wasn't just Baker. That last throw that Jordan Love made was pretty bad, and I'll talk about that next. But Baker Mayfield, this offseason, is going to be a free agent. And I would not be shocked if he ends up going back to Tampa and he signs at least $43-45 million a year deal for about 2-3 years. Now, here's the thing, and I looked this up yesterday. I believe Baker Mayfield is 28 years old. Yes, he's 28. And so I saw that yesterday, and I thought to myself, Baker Mayfield is 28 years old right now, so you don't want to give him a 4-year deal. That's a little bit too much because that deal would then expire when he's about 32. But I have no problem saying, you know what? Let's give Baker Mayfield a 2-year deal, a 3-year deal, kind of Geno Smith bridge quarterback structure. I think more money, though. I think $43 to $45 million a year is absolutely acceptable. He deserves it. Baker bet on himself. He's had like 8 different head coaches in 6 years, the most in that span. He has been through a lot. He has been forced to adapt. I haven't always been super high on Baker, but after this year, he absolutely deserves to get a second shot somewhere else. I think Tampa, culturally, it's a good fit. You know, it's a really almost like goofy, really fun place. It's in northern Florida. He perfectly embodies what Tampa is culturally. He can be himself. He can be a little bit, that cockiness that we saw at Oklahoma can kind of come out, that college football Baker that we loved. Those elements of who he is, he doesn't have to hide it. He's not in Cleveland anymore. He's not necessarily in LA where there's a lot of distractions and it just seems kind of corny. In Tampa, it feels like Baker Mayfield is the perfect cultural fit. He did have a great year. In my opinion, there's a no-brainer here. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers have to sign Baker Mayfield. You thought you were going to be an awful organization this year. At least, I'm sure some people, even though they won't say it, that team, beyond the players on the roster, like front office, I'm sure wondered, man, how far is this thing going to go this year? They were in a lot of projections as potentially being in the running for Drake May or Caleb Williams at the end of this year. They were nowhere close to it. They made it to the playoffs. They won a game. They made it, you know, they were just a game away from making the NFC Championship game. And that's where, when you saw Baker Mayfield, his head fall into his hands at the end of the game, he knew it too. Like, you felt it in that moment. On a camera crew did a good job of catching that moment because, like, you felt it. Just a play away, a drive away from the NFC Championship game could have totally changed the narrative around about your career. And I think he felt it in that moment, and I felt bad. But I think he's already done enough to earn another contract, to disprove a lot of haters. And I think if Daniel Jones got $40 million a year, Baker Mayfield is going to get at least 43, I assume $45 million per year. Now, it's not going to be a 4-year deal. Like I said, he's 28 years old. Don't want that contract to expire when he's 32. Is a little bit of a smaller player. He's not 6'5", not 260 or anything like that. He's not a Josh Allen body type. He's not even a Mahomes body type, who is actually a little bit on the smaller side in terms of like stature and size. In the end, it doesn't matter. I'll be the first one to say that. But for Baker, it kind of does. And you saw him in the end there, like looking over the offensive line and struggling to, you know, look over the bigger guys in the field. And that's when he threw the INT at the end of that game. So, not saying he's a top 5 quarterback, not saying he deserves to be paid like a top 5 quarterback, but culturally, I think Tampa knows he's the best fit for them. Went in there, a lot of doubt, a lot of people, a lot of noise, ends up disproving all of that, gets him into the playoff, wins a playoff game. Baker is the perfect fit for Tampa. I do hope that they come together this offseason and they say, we want to keep you here. Felt like it was a really good fit on the football field, in the locker room, culturally. Tampa really loved him this year. I know some people in Tampa, and they really enjoyed the Baker run. And hope he gets paid this offseason. I assume he will. In my opinion, if I had to say Baker should get paid, Baker should not get paid, Baker should be paid by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers this offseason, I would assume $43 million per year. 3 years would be the perfect contract for me. Don't want to overpay him too much and don't want to give him too long of a contract. He is 28 years old, which in football is not a spring chicken. So that's just my thoughts on that. Really good game from him. Obviously not the best that he could have played, but really proud of him this year and how that team really came together in spite of all the doubt. So Packers 49ers is probably going to be the second most viewed game of the weekend behind only the great game and the great rivalry of the Kansas City Chiefs and the Buffalo Bills. And some people will say it's not a rivalry because in the postseason, Josh Allen is 0-3 against Patrick Mahomes. Okay, it's a good matchup. You know what I'm saying? But 49ers, I watch Brock Purdy and he worries me. Debo goes down in the middle of that game. Brock Purdy doesn't have a clean game. It's raining a lot, just like it was in that Cleveland game earlier in the year. And Brock Purdy, smaller guy, last pick in the draft. You start to see why people passed on him. His hands, real small, is having trouble gripping the ball, is like totally frazzled, looks very uncomfortable, looks like the pressure of the moment has got to him. I always admired Brock Purdy for always looking like the guy that had no idea what the score was or no idea what the narrative on the outside was about him. It felt like in that game against the Packers, Brock Purdy felt all the pressure. He knew it. All the conversations about being a system quarterback, about being someone who's carried by his teammates, the yak guys, the guys always getting yards after the catch for him being just a facilitator, him being a product of Kyle Shanahan's system. That pressure got to him. You could see it. It was obvious. His mind was racing. He was overthrowing guys. He was guiding the ball. Dan Orlovsky talked about it on First Take, and I thought it was very obvious and very true. He looked afraid to make the decision to let it rip. And when he did, he was kind of inaccurate with the football downfield. Call it the elements, call it the pressure of the moment. Brock Purdy looked mortal in that moment. And now we've seen this from Brock Purdy a couple times this year where if the elements aren't ideal and a guy like Deebo Samuel goes down or Christian McCaffrey goes down or Trent Williams is out, Brock Purdy does not look like this invincible system. Doesn't look like this invincible guy who's just going to slice and dice every defense. He doesn't look like a surgeon. He looks like a mere mortal of a man. And that's not what we're used to seeing from Brock Purdy, especially when you watch him in the regular season, when most of the time he is very much so cutting it up. He didn't look like that regular season Brock Purdy. This looked like Brock Purdy found out about the outside narratives and found out about the noise, and it was just going through his head. You could see it. He did not look nearly as confident or as poised or as steady in the pocket as he normally does. He looked jittery. He looked afraid. He looked like the weather was a little bit overwhelming, like the pass rush was a little bit overwhelming, and Green Bay put the pressure on him. Credit to them. In the end, I am a little bit more concerned about Brock Purdy next week. I know a lot of people are saying, oh, you know what? Brock Purdy is going to end up probably, he'll end up playing relatively well. I don't know if that's the case. And with Deebo Samuel potentially being out, apparently they're saying Adam Schefter, it's a 50-50 chance to go right now. I look at all of that, and I apologize for stopping in the middle of what I was saying, but I'm really thinking this out. There's probably no chance that Deebo Samuel misses that game. Toradol all the way is probably what the athletic training staff is going to do. Not say, but that's probably what the result will be. I assume Deebo Samuel goes, whether he's 50%, 60%, or 100%. Nobody's at 100% at this point in the year. That's the argument that all the players will make. He is going to want to play, and the team's going to want him to play. I assume that he'll be good enough to go on Sunday or Saturday. Sunday, because there's no more Saturday games. But man, Brock Purdy worried me this weekend. And I'm not saying burn the tape. I'm not saying you cut him tomorrow. I'm not saying that they failed or that he's getting exposed. But Brock Purdy gave me room for doubt. I all of a sudden feel a lot better about the Detroit Lions and Jared Goff and Aiden Hutchinson and Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery and Amon-Ra St. Brown and Dan Campbell leading the men to the promised land and Ben Johnson calling a great game and C.J. Gardner-Johnson being steady on the back end and being able to make plays in the secondary. This feels like a much more even NFC Championship game than I thought it would. I don't know where I'm leaning right now. I assume that Deebo Samuel will play. Even if he does, he's not going to be 100%. I may very well take Detroit in that game. Excellent offensive line, really good defensive line, and a secondary that has really come into their own when they've needed to at the end of this year. I'm telling you, it's going to be the battle of the secondaries in this postseason. I said it earlier in the playoff, and I'm coming back to it. Great secondary play is underrated, but it's going to make a difference. Chiefs have a great secondary. Feels like the Detroit Lions have a great secondary who's really coming into their own at this point in the year. 49ers a little bit more vulnerable. Baltimore Ravens, probably one of the better secondaries in the league, of course, but are they as good as the top guys in the league? That remains to be seen. But yeah, felt like I didn't know what I was seeing from Brock Purdy. Felt like he was a vulnerable, mortal man in that moment. Felt like the pressure got to him. That worries me going into the NFC Championship game against the Detroit Lions team that is playing with house money. They are in it to win it. They have so much good mana and so much good energy surrounding them at this point in the year. They are ready for this moment. Is Brock Purdy? I don't know after last weekend. I really don't. We're going to talk a little bit of basketball now because I have been meaning to do so, and I don't like to have these conversations too early in the season, especially team conversations, because these teams are going to evolve and they're going to be so different come playoff time. And in just 2-3 months, their identity constantly changes, right? For most of these teams, at least, it is too early to tell. But I watched this Boston Celtics team, and everybody wants to tell me the Boston Celtics are the number one team in the East, and they have 33 wins, they have 10 losses, and they're rolling, and they're stacking up the wins, and watch out for Jason Tatum. I have watched the Boston Celtics in big moments this year against the Bucks a couple weeks ago and against the Denver Nuggets just last week. And in those moments, it feels like they come up short. In the end, you can tell me all you want about Jason Tatum and about this starting five and how Drew Holiday, even though he's out right now, was a really nice ad for the Boston Celtics and how they won that trade and how they have continued to build and they're going to be in it in the end. I have no doubt that the Boston Celtics are going to be in the playoff conversation and in contention at the end of the year. But by the same token, they've already shown us a couple years in a row now under different front offices, different head coaches, different management, that this starting five led by Jason Tatum just lacks the big game ability, the big moment ability, lacks a clutch gene. You see it when he misses that shot to tie the game against the Denver Nuggets. You see it when they play in big spots. You see it when they play on the road. You see it when they play the better teams. They are absolutely a top 10 team in the league right now, probably top 5. But come postseason time, being number 1 in the East doesn't matter. And the Celtics have consistently proved that no matter how good we think they are, they're going to come up short. I compare the Boston Celtics to the Dallas Cowboys in the NFL. Like, relatively acceptable coaching, right? Will get it done in the regular season. Not sure if they can handle the conversation and the noise and the lights in the postseason. Great talent. What are they more than talented? Can they come together when it matters most? Kind of just feels like this Boston Celtics team is always going to be in the conversation as a contender, and rightfully so because they are one of the more talented and one of the better teams in the NBA. But I see this year after year after year with the Celtics, no matter what little adjustments they make when it comes to the front office, when it comes to coaching, whether intentional changes or not on their part or their hand kind of got forced. I'm not going to get into it. You know what I'm talking about. Roster changes, making little moves here and there, bringing in Drew Holiday, acting like you won the trade, all of this conversation. Celtics have always been a great regular season team, and they seem to get pretty far in the postseason. Are they a championship team? I do not think so. They are showing me telltale signs that they have in years prior that, sure, they're going to win a lot of games, especially at home, because it's a great environment and they can really get it done at home. But in big moments against better teams and tight situations and close games, can they make the go-ahead bucket? Can they win the game? Can they buckle down and really have the mental fortitude to lock in the last 4 minutes of a game when it is getting really contentious against a better team? They have yet to do that in my lifetime, and they have seriously underachieved for what I think that roster can achieve, and that's why I get so frustrated with them. But at the end of the day, this is who the Boston Celtics are. I do not think they are a true championship contender. They will be one of the last teams standing. They will not win the entire thing. AFC Championship pick, right now I'm leaning towards the Baltimore Ravens. I like the Kansas City Chiefs. If they keep it close, they will win it because Patrick Mahomes just has that championship DNA. If it is 17-14 in the fourth quarter, if it is 17-13 in the fourth quarter, if it's 20-17 in the fourth quarter, Mahomes is going to win that game 10 times out of 10 because he just knows how to win these close games in the postseason. But I assume Ravens, better roster, they're going to win the game. With that being said, wouldn't be surprised if the Chiefs won this one. In the NFC, Brock Purdy seriously worried me this weekend. He looked mortal. He gave me, there is room for concern if you're a 49ers fan or if you're somebody who simply watches their games. Brock Purdy looked mortal. He didn't look as confident. He worries me going into this next game after a really questionable and shaky performance against the Packers, a young team that, although talented, is very young. You should not have let the game be that close. Packers are going to be a good team for a long time, like we're talking 10-year run potentially because of all the young guys in that roster and Jordan Love, and they plan on making him the highest paid quarterback or one of the highest paid in the NFL at the end of this year and the offseason is the report. I don't mind that. I think he absolutely deserves it. What a great transition from the Packers. Once again, I mean, they just know how to draft quarterbacks. They know how to develop guys. Credit to them. Unfortunately, their season is now over, but I think they definitely showed just how nervous and jittery and not confident Brock Purdy can be in a big spot. I'm going to take the Lions. Excellent roster, excellent story. In the end, I think it'll be the Baltimore Ravens against the Detroit Lions in the Super Bowl, although 49ers were my pick to make it to the Super Bowl before the season started. Am I making a mistake from straying away from my preseason picks? Maybe. I have a bad habit of doing that. We'll see how it all plays out. Until next week, I'm Benjamin Cure. This is the Benjamin Cure Show. Thank you so much for tuning in.